Jinbei versus Jinbei, fire versus water, father versus son, sort of, and fish versus flying mecha fish. All of that is a thing that could apparently happen. In fact, so many massive things have just happened. For example, is that their Seraphim using a devil fruit? And if so, what happened to my precious, precious baby man? And also that teeny tiny confirmation that One Piece does not exist in a world in the past, it is in fact in the far future. So that has literally changed everything. But as part of our science-based shenaniganry, this pod of the Straw Hats encountered Seraph Jinbei, which of course resulted in fight battling. A really cool fight scene, actually. In general, I can just never get enough of the Straw Hats working together. And it happens so rarely because they have this tendency to just isolate themselves in one-on-ones, but they make such an amazing team. The highlight of the fight was definitely Robin. I love that death glare she gave Seraph Jinbei when he hurt Nami. And it gave me these real chills, even though she didn't use Demonio during the fight, Devil Child Nico Robin was still on full display here. I'm also really starting to get into her new techniques. I like how the Sea Serpent attack kind of mimics Luffy's stretching to the best of Robin's abilities. That's something I didn't really pick up on during her fight with Black Maria, but it's a perfect adoption for Robin as a distance fighter. This whole conflict came with a very potent shot of nostalgia though, particularly for the Sabaody days, because this is not the first time that the Straw Hats have faced off against a Vegapunk convention and have had a lot of difficulty beating it. And I do think that was intentional. Pre-time skip, the Straw Hats pretty seriously struggled to take down a single Pacifista. Then post-time skip, they're basically one-shotting them. So this is Oda showing us the true scale of the Seraphim abilities. They aren't just a slight improvement. They've taken our post-time skip crew and made them feel almost as helpless as the pre-time skip days. These things are a legitimate threat. So much so that the bulk of the crew of an Emperor of the Sea is having a rough time against just one. So imagine the force that the Seraphim would be as a group of 7, or however many of them there are. With this particular one, deemed Seraphim number 4, I believe, I really enjoyed the Straw Hat reactions, jumping from the idea that he was Jinbei's son, and then immediately to the thought that, oh no, Jinbei has turned into a child maybe. And to be fair to Nami, that's not actually the worst guess in this world. I don't think it's a bad guess at all, actually, because there are so many crazy abilities in One Piece that you can never count any scenario out. And in fact, on Egghead Island right now, we have Jewelry Bonnie, who could literally bring that idea into reality by transforming Jinbei into a child, which she did, but not this child. And that makes me wonder if in the future this cohort of the crew are going to encounter the real Jinbei affected by Bonnie's powers and then mistake him for a Seraph in some sort of comical scene. But first, this video is sponsored by Established Titles, a project based on a Scottish custom whereby landowners are referred to as lords, lairds, and ladies in English. In fact, even my dog has recently become Lord Don Quixote Dog Flamingo and was on his way to Scotland, but complications arose and now he is facing a grueling legal battle in order to prove his own identity. Title packs give you at least 1 square foot of dedicated land with a unique plot number on a private estate in Eddleston, Scotland. And with them, you can officially include the title of Lord or Lady on all sorts of things like credit cards. It's amazing. They make a great last minute gift, and Established Titles plants a tree with every order, working with global charities in order to support restoration efforts. Plus, I've been told that everyone who uses my link will get plots next to each other, so we could even build our own kind of Scottish land-based Grand Line empire. Go to establishedtitles.com to shop their Black Friday sale and get an additional 10% off using code GRANDLINE to support the channel as well as my dog's ego. Speaking of, Dog Flamingo won his day in court by using his Established Titles proclamation to prove his lordly identity and is now free to set sail to Scotland, wherever that may be. So do that thing, but for now it's back to you. Me? Also, just a small narrative thing. This plot point is why Oda had Bonnie change Jinbei into a child rather than an old man. It's planting that image of child Jinbei in the reader's minds before we even encounter his Seraph. Because most casual readers aren't entrenched in the SBS segments and know back to front what all of the warlords look like as kids, so it's another one of those very small decisions that shows how carefully Oda considers constructing his story and making it hit the readers as hard as it possibly can. Now, there's a lot of potential for fun future scenarios when you start involving things like clones. For example, I'm really keen to see how Jinbei will react to this. It really could go in any direction, like a full-on, that's disgusting, how dare you bring this thing into the world. Or it could go all the way to, come here, let me embrace my son. Come here, my me. If it was my clone, I feel like I'd feel some degree of responsibility. I'd have a really hard time leaving him at a lab to be used as a weapon, but I also don't know just how deeply Oda wants to dive into the morality aspect of non-consensual cloning. Let's talk about something that worries me even more. Seraph Jinbei appears to be a devil fruit user, and there are multiple explanations for how, but right now it looks like he's using Senor Pink's devil fruit, the swim fruit, which was flagged by Frankie. And the first of our possibilities is that after Dressrosa, Senor Pink was caught, executed, and the devil fruit shipped off to Vegapunk to implant into the Seraph. That would be probably definitely the most morbid outcome. It could happen though, because Oda is getting a little bit more willing to kill characters, especially off screen, and we haven't seen anything from Senor Pink since he was beaten on Dressrosa. We did see a shot of him and Frankie on the cover of 1021, but that was an art request. quest. Another option would be that Vegapunk had the chance to study Senor Pink since he was captured, as he often does with pirates that are captured, your Kaidos, your Kings, etc. And in much the same way that Vegapunk managed to, in my opinion, pretty much perfectly replicate Kaido's fruit, he's been able to do the same thing with Senor Pink's fruit. So the artificial Jinbei could be using a new artificial fruit, which is huge actually because that would be the first artificial fruit to replicate a non-Zoan effect. Or we could be skipping the fruit stage entirely with Vegapunk diving into the DNA of the Seraphim and manipulating their lineage factor directly via the power of fictional science. Because in theory, if Vegapunk understands the code change that the devil fruit makes, then he could find a way to replicate that code without using the fruit itself. Again, this is purely fictional science, but I imagine that if you can study the DNA of the devil fruit user and note all of the changes and differences, and then if you're like really good at sciencing, manipulate existing DNA to replicate those changes that the fruit would make. I love the power that was chosen for Seraph Jinbei though, because Oda once revealed what devil fruit each of the Straw Hats would eat, and when it came to Jinbei, he said that he would be a Tori Tori Zoan, so one of the bird fruits. The idea being that Jinbei would need to make up for not being able to swim, so he would want to fly. However, with those Lunarian wings, Seraph Jinbei can fly by default. So now to make up for not being able to swim, Jinbei would want to be able to swim. And given that he can still use Fishman Karate, I think there is a great argument to be made that should Kaido be dead, Seraph Jinbei could be considered the strongest creature in the world. On land, sea, and air, he is said to be the strongest creature alive. If it's one-on-one, always bet on baby Jinbei. This opens up a ton of exciting possibilities for the other Seraphim though, because we could end up seeing a one-piece pick and mix of traditional warlords using different devil fruit powers, depending on either what Vegapunk deems suits them better, or just what the world government has available at the time. It's very much limitless. Any warlord could be paired with any fruit that Vegapunk has had the chance to study. So I love everything that's being set up here. Something unexpected is that this chapter also dumped a gaggle of new Vegapunks on top of us, introducing us to Edison, Pythagoras, and York in a very fun comedic scene. Oda has this habit when it comes to introducing groups. He'll start by showing us one really cool character, then maybe another, and then it's just here, have the rest. They're all weird as crap. Enjoy. So it's both expected and unexpected because it's quite a typical Oda scene, but at the same time I don't think anyone ever expects to be confronted with two robots who share the same third-party mechanism of eating, sleeping, and defecating. And on that, let's start with York, the Vegapunk of Desire. Her life seems pretty damn intense. Like you would think that being able to eat, drink, and sleep all day, like that sounds quite relaxing, like you're in a zoo, but not to see the animals, for people to see you. But when you're eating, sleeping, and again, defecating for six whole people, then that sounds like a really intense life. And York would probably even give Magellan a challenge for the amount of time spent in the bathroom, thus commencing a sort of very unpleasant throne war. York is like the productivity dream though. Being able to cast aside those basic human needs that always cost time, so much time, is something I've often wished I had access to. Meanwhile, Pythagoras and Edison are adorable. I love these funky little science robots. They give me some very Akira Toriyama vibes because he always enjoyed drawing very curvy robots with childlike expressions. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they were based on some sort of classic Japanese mecha that I'm not aware of because I am an English-speaking swine, but it would make sense because Oda is introducing a lot of old-school popular culture in this arc, which is an interesting and shockingly appropriate statement in and of itself. The island of the future, made up of pop culture from the past. Before we get to that, Edison's role seems to be the inspiration guy. He's the one who comes up with all of the new amazing ideas. Meanwhile, Pythagoras is the workhorse who meticulously implements everything. York and Atlas seem to handle more basic human needs, like all of the desires and emotions, specifically rage in the case of Atlas, I guess. Meanwhile, it looks like Shaka and Lilith embody exact opposite ends of the moral compass of Vegapunk. Shaka taking on the general good, and Lilith being the incarnation of evil. Thinking about it, it says a lot that even though Lilith is the evil one, she's not actually that evil. I feel like I'd describe her as more mischievous with the ability and willingness to kill. That's pretty important. But still, it tells me that the original Vegapunk was probably far more good than he was evil. However, did everyone notice the special 7th Vegapunk in this chapter? One very fun moment was when Usopp admitted that he was also Vegapunk. It was a very small gag, but Usopp's lies, no matter what the scale, do have a tendency to come true in some form or another. It's just what he does. The man is a prophet. Even his unintentional lies often find a way to manifest into reality, so I could see this coming back down the line, probably nothing important, and it's nothing I'm going to heavily speculate on now. But just note, it has been added to the Book of Nostradamus. And then we come to the twist that could redefine this entire series. The fact that the Great Kingdom was a civilization more advanced than what we are today, and that the world of One Piece takes place in a dystopian regressed future. Now, I use the word twist, but this is actually not entirely unexpected. In fact, if you follow the cover stories, it's very much expected. When Eno went to the moon, he discovered an ancient race of these adorable space cyborgs, showing us that hyper-advanced technology has existed for, well, who knows how many years, hundreds, perhaps even thousands. These also happen to be the same type of cyborgs that were built on Vegapunk's home of Karakuri Island, and also more than likely the same type of cyborgs that are currently being shrouded as the various assistants of Egghead Island. But all of this makes Vegapunk such a fascinating character to me, because he isn't some inspired genius looking into the future. He's still a genius, but he's focusing on figuring out how to replicate the past. It's very Frankie-like, really. He discovered the remains of Vegapunk's lab and used his research to further his own technology. Meanwhile, Vegapunk himself is in very much the same position, discovering the technology of an even greater scientist, and has been using that to further his own inventions, although even he is unable to reach the heights of the past. You know, maybe it was that original scientist or group of sciencing people who created devil fruits to begin with. With each and every development, it feels like we take one step towards the idea that all devil fruits are artificial. All of them are grown in a lab, and the only reason why the world considers them cursed fruit is because science, too advanced for people to understand, is always going to be written off as magic. What I'm really keen to learn is just how much the world government knows about this ancient technology. Like, did they deliver these devices to Vegapunk to study, or has he acquired them in secret somehow? But combining this with the impending death aspect, I imagine that someone will be required to finish whatever mission Vegapunk has in this world. Perhaps someone very specifically Frankie-shaped, maybe. Because when you think about it, if Vegapunk doesn't exist, then that automatically makes Frankie one of the leading engineers in the world. I mean, yes, we've got our judges and our Caesars, but their specialty lies more in biology and chemistry. And it feels like Void Century answers are well within reach here. Vegapunk probably knows quite a bit, although I would expect his ultimate answer to be something like, yeah, look, this happened, but I don't know how or why, because we still need to save our final answers for when Robin discovers them through the assorted history cubes. And then there's Caribou. I don't even say that as a joke. He's been let loose on Egghead Island, or more accurately told to F off in the nicest way possible. But what is his purpose? What has ever been his purpose? I am ever so curious to find out why he is legitimately the most important post-time skip character apart from the core Straw Hats. That answer is coming very, very soon.